Namaste ji, this is your host Ankit Adwal. I help successful founders and CEOs build brands with the power of design. Stay tuned because what's coming next can change your entire life.
All my life, I have only known people, and how can I solve problems for them is what I've aimed for. Whether it is related to design, business, or life, I'm there to help. I always wanted to do the right thing, no matter how much time it takes. In doing so, I met amazing people in my life. Today, I'm so happy to start the second season of Mountwood Studio podcast. My journey has brought me here, where I'm about to introduce a gem from the design industry. This amazing person has a very rich experience of 15 years in the design field. Solving complex problems with simplicity is where his idea becomes innovation. From innovation to design, from improving diner experience at a restaurant during school vacations to working at HP's BPO, and then paying to the investment team at Sidby's Venture Capital arm. Not only this, he is the author of a book called Design the Future. I welcome Shrutin Shetty, design thinking expert, co-founder of Crystal Planet Labs, a Mumbai-based global innovation and design strategy practice. Welcome, Shrutin. Welcome on our show.
Thank you. Thanks, Ankit.
And 15 years of rich experience is like, oh, that's great. I think it will take time for me to reach over there. But truly, it's a very good experience. And as I've said, you are a gem from the design industry. And I'm very honored to have you on our show.
Thank you. I probably wouldn't say 15 years in the sense, so design has been an area of interest for me. I have a diverse work experience of about 15 years, maybe a little more. But I stumbled upon design thinking, I think, formally in 2015.
Okay.
So I would probably call myself, a dreamer who's trying to probably change the world by way of more meaningful products, services, and interactions. So it need not just be business related, but also with the people that we meet and interact with. I believe all of those with a little bit of design and behavior can help kind of create a better ecosystem. So that's the journey I'm on. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, and I'm wishing you all the best for your future because there are more coming creative designing years to you. And let's start with a brief introduction so that our audience know what you have done till now, because it's like going back to behind 15 years, and there might be so many things that you have done till now, met so with amazing people in life till now. So I'm very excited to know about you and how you started, everything that you can tell me.
Sure. I think if I look back on how I got here, it's probably partly to do thanks to the family, thanks to the kind of education I've had, but also a lot I think because of chance and probably being open to exploring those opportunities. Also about having some sort of understanding of what my interests are, so that when opportunities present themselves, you know which one is probably a direction that will add value or will is something that you will enjoy. So I think for that, knowing a little bit about myself has helped. Just a little bit of introspection has helped in being able to choose better opportunities. Interestingly, a couple of years back, one of the top 5 IT companies in India, somebody from there got in touch saying, they had like a senior role open in their innovation team. So, I'm meeting with the head of innovation there. I walk in and he's sitting back in his chair, going through my resume, and first thing he tells me before even saying hi, hello is, don't mind me saying this, but for lack of a better word, your experience looks a little weird, and I don't know. I mean, maybe people who have been in maybe one industry or one kind of career may have found it a little insulting. I couldn't stop smiling, because I almost said thank you. I probably did actually. But then, interestingly, about an hour later, or maybe a little more, where he put me through these different tests and exercises in terms of trying to gauge if I can handle these different kind of complex projects and all of that. After that point, he was on my side. So in a sense, he was telling me what the next round of interview is going to be like. He came and bought lunch and all of that. And I think after the next round, I went back to just meet him and tell him how the round went. And he was asking me, like, can you do this and can you do that, and how are your presentation skills and all of that, or making PowerPoints and a bunch of other areas as well. And I said, they're pretty good. He's like, okay, that's good, because our team kind of struggles with some of those things, so maybe you can help with that. I said, it's actually the weird experience, the journey that has taught me all of these things. I haven't learned it because you've chosen, a slightly off-road path, and there was no choice. There was no kind of support ecosystem. So you had to kind of figure out all of those things by yourself, which has kind of, added those little, I don't know, edges that help with, tackling different situations. So I just cover briefly my education. I'm a computer engineer, done my MBA in finance. Briefly studied a little bit about quality. So I'm a certified quality improvement associate, and I've studied design thinking, through a project-based course offered by the Darden School of Business.
Okay.
Like I said, some of these things happen purely by chance. I think I signed up for like a free course on Coursera many years back that I didn't even pursue.
Okay.
That university probably had some tie-up with them, so they were probably collecting email IDs or something. So I got an email directly from the institute saying, since you have been a member of Coursera, we're offering you, a small discount on this particular course. And I don't know why. I mean, I hadn't even heard of the term design thinking back then. I signed up, and then during the course, I actually realized that it seemed to come naturally to me. So that's when I realized that I was probably using several aspects of design thinking, in my day-to-day life, in my work, and all of that, without really knowing explicitly that this is what it's called, or this is what the process is, or any of that. And that also probably brought into focus some of the other areas where I had found myself kind of having a slightly counter view to the norm. So, for example, post MBA, I joined a venture capital firm, and anybody on the investment team, you might assume to be slightly more finance inclined in terms of the numbers, the projections, and all of that. But I was of the view that if you can align those businesses better with customers, the numbers will kind of take care of themselves. They'll happen automatically. And I felt somehow it was easier to do the alignment than I don't know, tweaking the numbers in terms of okay, maybe we'll recruit more salespeople and then keep flogging them and hope for the sales to jump, and somehow some kind of tactics in terms of improving sales and then profitability and all of that didn't seem to make as much sense as are we in the right business. So for our portfolio companies, for example, I'll give you the example of so I'm talking 2007. Yeah, don't mind me, I'll be drifting between a little bit about my background. And
no, that's totally fine, because if something is like important to me, I'll be also jotting down the points so that I know, this is important. Yeah.
For instance, I think 2007, so one of our existing portfolio companies was in the secure logistics space. It's a beautiful business back then, very relevant. So these guys used to do secure, uh, you know, shipments of, let's say, your checkbooks, credit cards, debit cards, all of that. And they had built like a reputable name for themselves. So they used to cater to uh, one large bank in particular, but they also had like some smaller accounts with other banks. Back then, airline tickets also used to be printed and sent out. So they were involved with that as well. So the printing, putting it like automating, putting it into like a sealed cover and then shipping it out to whoever the recipient is. Before the financial meltdown, they went on this huge expansion drive. And I remember meeting them probably before that or right after the meltdown. We were a little concerned about, the clientele, so to speak. So of course the numbers were good. Till the meltdown, they were growing very well. They were profitable. But again, if you dig deeper into how that business is coming, a big chunk of it was happening through checkbooks, a smaller chunk through credit cards, all of that, and then airline tickets was another account for them. And I think it was around the time where there was this discussion around discontinuing printed airline tickets. Right? So I'm not sure if it was then, but it was like a possibility.
Okay.
And for some reason, I've also been a little interested in this whole, green efforts, like at a personal level. So personally, also, I'll try and minimize the number of printouts I took and all of that. So it seemed a little logical that at some point, maybe these airline tickets, there's a better way of producing them at the counter. You don't need like this big booklet to be printed. So I'd actually suggested to them, I think back then there was just one or two small efforts in the e-com space. I think Flipkart was just about starting up, but there were one or two other players. One had, I think, shut down slightly before that. There was the first mover. If I remember right, I think Rediff was doing something on the e-com, the shopping bit. And, so that was a suggestion that it seemed like a obvious choice that why do you guys move into this space? It looks like it's here to stay, as opposed to maybe we'll have checkbooks tomorrow, maybe we won't, maybe, cards and all of that will sort things out, make it simpler. But I don't know. I mean, from a company point of view, again, I guess it's not that easy for them to suddenly switch gears. And of course, unfortunately, they went on this huge expansion right before the meltdown. So after meltdown, they found themselves, hugely cash crunched. And then for the next few years, it was pretty tough because we did a follow-on, small investment from whatever fund we had left. But I think eventually they had to shut shop. So again, going back to from purely a business point of view, from purely numbers, just before the meltdown, it looked perfect. The numbers are trending upwards and profitability and all of that. But like I said, if you look at it from, is this making sense to the customer? Is this aligned with the right set of customers? And does that kind of assure of a better growth or a more solid foundation on which to grow? That seemed shaky in this particular case. So all of those kind of linked in the sense. So I'm not your pure VC who will go purely by the numbers. And I think these little experiences kind of also open up that side where you are exploring things like behavior, customer delight, all of those things. So back in school, I used to a few vacations, this relative's restaurant. So I'd be going there, spending the mostly evenings, and mostly just observing. So you'd be standing in one corner, observing the small details about how a customer walks in, how does the waiter kind of approach And then maybe after the customer leaves, I probably would call the waiter aside, just give him a suggestion or two. So it's these little things that you start observing. Then after a point, all of those things tend to build up around like a product concept. So for example, you probably see this a lot at restaurants even now, where a waiter might cross you to fill your glass of water or something of that sort, which generally is not something that you would want, like suddenly one hand pops in from, so things like that. So these little things about, so what comes into that is everything from maybe the layout of the table, where a waiter should ideally approach from, and so on and so forth. And so when coming back to my journey after that, so after the school stints with the restaurant, after engineering, I worked briefly with Hewlett Packard's BPO in Bangalore. I think back then that was like a default first option for a lot of people. So in fact, there were like a ton of people from my batch itself who joined with me. So I was just there for a couple of months, but it was more like an extension of college, so you got to hang out with the same friends for like a small while after college was done. But it also taught me a lot about the people side of things. So of course, you're fixing like a technical flaw, or, helping them through, let's say, a software issue with their device. But more than that, it was the people aspect of it. So everything from handling angry customers, impatient customers. If somebody else, they were already angry, and somebody, one of your colleagues messed up with them, and then they call back, and the call comes to you. How do you deal with that? And of course, initially wasn't very enjoyable, especially given the whole everything. Like Bangalore was freezing. Me from Bombay, it was like a very different kind of weather to get used to. We were doing graveyard shifts. Getting back home at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then like you lose sense of day and night and which day of the week it is, all of that. But I think it taught me a lot about managing those interactions, which have kind of helped later on, where, let's say, I was working with a technology company, heading their Western India operations out of Pune. So these guys into manufacturing, they're in the industrial robotics space, they're in the ERP solutions. And I was in charge of setting up that office in Pune. So everything from recruiting a team there to kind of creating a presence. We didn't have too big a team, and we were competing with brands in robotics which were far ahead of us, and who had like 20-member teams in Pune itself. And I was, single-handedly handling the robotics function for a long time. Occasionally, I'd get, one engineer sent from headquarters or something. But but everything from building trust with those customers, trying to figure out how you can kind of make some headway, not for, given the obvious, So the obvious would be, which is what I initially did, where I first, I bought these industry directories, and I was cold calling people, fixing up meetings with plant heads or general managers, CEOs and all of that. But and then I asked headquarters if they had a presentation on about the robotics and all of that, and they said they didn't. And just being an MBA, I thought that was like the default thing to do. So I created a presentation. I used to take it, ask these people for like 5 minutes of the time, and present it to them. And most of the time, they'd have this bored look in their face. And once I was just casually chatting with this one industry colleague of mine, and he mentioned that he's like, Shrutin, don't sell robots to me. So he's like, we've got about 3 crore worth of robots sitting idle for the last 2 years in our plant because our workers won't let us install it on the production line.
Okay.
So that's why it struck me that, so that is like a huge challenge, because these people, it's their livelihood. And even though the intention of us offering automation was not to remove people, but it was more to do with there are some very high risk areas in production where you don't want a worker, manually handling something where there's a press or something, your hands could get crushed. Or so then what I did was I collected all the videos we had, recordings of robot installations that we had done in other parts of the country, including some from Japanese partner. And when I'd go to these companies, you just gather up the plant workers, the plant head and all of that, and you show them some of these videos. So then they started warming up to this idea of automation. They realized that some of these areas which probably they didn't realize before, that it was that higher risk in terms of injury. That maybe only this function can be automated, so then we can still continue with our jobs. And
okay,
so yeah, I mean, drifting along the way, yeah, it's been a slightly more people focused approach.
And I think it's according to my experience, few people chose design as their profession, but for some, creative it is always there. It can be defined in different terms, and we don't choose design chooses us. So I think all those life till all those entire time that you have been working, and after that, after your college days, you have gone to Bangalore, and it's like we are like at that time we are more focused with the friends. Where are you going and what you're doing? I'll also follow you. But after some time, we realize that friends will be there, always there with us. But we have to take certain decisions, and then you have joined the venture capital. In my life, I have read about Sedbay in my books. I haven't met anyone who is from the Sedbay, so you are the first one. And the experience that you are having and working with the airline industry, thinking about the dining experience, where the waiter will be coming to, the airline tickets, reducing the cost of the printing tickets. So I think all those things, your managerial skills and everything, is becoming handy now after so many years.
Absolutely.
And that's why your ideas is becoming innovations. So hats off to you for doing so many things over here. So
thank you.
So let's
long way to go.
Yeah, long way to go, and I think you'll be solving more problems. Like the owner was saying, don't sell me the robots. Currently, this is the one thing that people do, they sell. If they keep this word sell aside and they start trying to help people, automatically sales will generate. You don't need to sell anything. Okay, so this is what I believe, and this is what my experience is saying. So let's come back to the topic of the design thinking, like how design thinking can be implemented. And if I'm a newbie, what is design thinking? Okay, if I'm from the industry which have no idea what is design thinking, how will you define from your experience?
Sure. So just to give you a little back story to that. So what I do presently, with Crystal Planet Labs, which is just a recent practice that has evolved from my consulting practice, started in 2012.
Okay.
So in 2012, I was offering strategy consulting, and then along the way, I stumbled upon design thinking. So that's kind of evolved now. And earlier, again, I was working with younger companies across the world. Right now, we are hoping to work more with larger companies, and then probably, what I would love to do is going forward, cater to challenging problems at larger companies, and perhaps over the weekend, have one day to work purely with startups, and then one day maybe purely for social causes. But right now, we felt one is, from an adequate challenge point of view, and also from a revenue point of view, we felt it was more appropriate to cater to larger companies. Coming to what design thinking is, so I did have an understanding of it, but I think it got refined around the time I was researching for my book. So a lot of us are familiar with the Stanford 5-step design thinking process. So in 2007, when I was speaking to senior people in industry, a lot of them were trying to implement design thinking or offer it to their customers. I realized that a lot of them did not understand what design thinking was. So probably thought it was more like a template that you could just apply to a process, and things will just kind of happen by itself. And in some cases, it felt a little wrong because you're selling this and to a client, saying you're selling either a workshop or whatever around design thinking, but then you don't understand it well yourself. And it's just that some of these companies were fairly big, so a client probably wouldn't question them on how genuine or not, or how strong their understanding of design thinking is. And that's the reason I also wrote the book. And then during that process, I kind of understood what design thinking was better. So for me, there are three foundations which kind of extend from the beginning to the end of, let's say, a design thinking project, right? If I were to condense design thinking into one simple line, it would be that do you care enough about someone's challenge to do something about it? That is design thinking for me as a definition. So that someone could be yourself, it could be your company, it could be your building, apartment, it could be your society or anything. Do you care enough about someone's challenge to do something about it? So then what can we do? So my process is a 9-step process where the 3 basic steps, it starts with humility. Humility for me is where we put ourselves in the back seat and you try and focus on somebody else who is facing a challenge. So the second step is empathy. Empathy is where you focus the light on somebody else and their problem. You try and understand it, you try and experience it, so that you can then use that with some ideation tools to find a solution for them. The third step is intent. The reason I put these steps is think of it as you are, let's say, you head a company, right? So as a leader, if you have humility and empathy, whether or not you want to bring about, let's say, a change in employee culture, or you want to align better with a different set of customers, if you have humility and empathy, you'll be capturing all of the relevant data about your employees, about your customers, all of that. And then whenever you do have an intent, you have all the resources to kind of then apply it, right? But if that's not the case, if you just think that your view is the final view, then you're mostly oblivious to what's happening with your customers or your employees. So then even if there is an intent, it's a very short-term, knee-jerk kind of reaction where you'd be like, okay, send them on an outbound, or we'll give these gifts for Diwali or something. And you expect like a huge drastic change to happen, which normally doesn't. So, so first we need humility, empathy, intent. Then you define the challenge.
Okay.
Empathize with intent. So that's where you interact with people. You know what you think is the challenge, but once you interact with them, oftentimes what happens is the challenge may be something very different. It might be much deeper, very different from what you thought it was or looked like at the surface. So then you redefine the challenge. Then you use some ideation tools, which, from which point of view, I mean, I'm sure all of us have used, things like brainstorming or using words to kind of nudge you in a particular direction. You mix and match different words to generate ideas which you may not have thought of otherwise. Prototype and test.
Okay.
So my work lies at the intersection of 3 things the creative, which is design thinking, empathy, ideation, all of that. But the behavioral, which has been a growing area of interest to me actually, because I think going forward, if let's say you have automation coming in, AI, robots, and all of that, the one place that we can stay relevant is in our understanding of people. By people, I mean also the ecosystem, plants, animals, all of that. But so the behavioral includes everything from interaction with customers. It includes biases. So when I am interacting with customers, I'm trying to be highly aware of how I'm framing my questions, how I'm actually interacting with them, all of that, because I believe that also kind of nudges them to either trust or not trust, to either be on guard or not, and so on. And unfortunately, if they are on guard, then I do not get the information that I would need to then solve that challenge for them. So I need them to be, in a trusting and calm state. So the behavioral, and then the strategic, of course, So ideation tools can lead you in all kinds of crazy directions in terms of possibilities, but all of them are not business worthy in terms of being profitable or implementable and all that. So given I don't know, maybe the engineering background or the MBA, but that tends to come in also in terms of making sure that the directions we're heading in do have some potential for creating an implementable solution for our clients.
Okay. So this is the definition, and how it's a very good example that you're giving about the design thinking, that it is more relating to what problems we can solve for someone. Let's suppose I'm a corporate client. As you said that you are dealing with the startups as well as with the big clients for the revenue and other things. So how you will implement design thinking? Let's give a scenario on this. How you will start the process, because these are the steps that you mentioned. I'm a layman and I don't know anything about it, because I might be knowing, but this is one thing that even if I know something, I will like to keep myself quiet and then let others talk about it, so that I can also judge them. So my question is like, how big corporations or startups will implement design thinking in their process? And
see, I think we tend to get obsessed with the process. So the reason I created the process was to convey the understanding, or my understanding of design thinking. But otherwise, like I said, we care enough about somebody's challenge to do something about it.
Okay.
Simply put, so most likely all of us are design thinkers by default. We've solved challenges for people without really realizing. So let me give you, a couple of instances. So one was with a startup. So this is right about the time I started my consulting thing back in 2012. Okay. I was roped in by this global incubator and a bunch of investors who were looking to invest in a bunch of startups. Of course, back then they didn't mention this to me, but apparently the plan was to just scale a bunch of them fast, build a reputation, start a VC fund, and all of that. I would have told them that it's not as easy as that. But so one of the investments that they were exploring was a mobile payments product. Right? Okay. It's not very glamorous, but back in the day, so these guys, the founder was, so I briefly did some work for them through this incubator. The founder was fixated upon these certain customer groups in terms of we catered these hotels and the premium restaurants and all of that. Simple exercise I did was created these different scenarios for those customer groups and looked at it from how does this product fit into this in terms of the customer using it or experiencing this particular product. And for some reason, for a premium clientele, which is all they were looking at, this did not exude a kind of confidence because it seemed a little tacky back in the day. But there were other applications where it seemed to be the perfect solution, which would have been something like a kirana or somebody, where a lot of times when they send stuff home, you don't have change, they don't have change, all of that confusion. And then you keep a balance and then lose track of that and stuff. So from that point of view, it seemed a little relevant in terms of how they could probably make a secure card payment, and something that customers would slightly be a bit more comfortable with, given that it's a smaller value item, since it's closer to home, since it's known parties, as opposed to premium places where you just go once in a way, high value tickets in terms of your consumptions, you're spending more, and there's a higher risk of, in case of a fraud, that you lose much more. So thankfully, the founder probably saw some reason. So they changed to this model where they were focusing more on things like home deliveries and all of that. And a few years down the line, they got acquired by a chain in that particular space.
Okay.
It seemed like a natural acquisition for them, I guess. So turned out well for them. Let's look at a large company. Rusi Modi used to be the chairman and managing director of Tata Steel, back in the day.
Okay.
So there's this story, I don't know if you heard about it online, but apparently once he was doing the rounds of the plant and they were crossing this worker's toilet, which was extremely dirty and it was like stinking outside. And he called his top executive and he's like, we need to do something about this. By when can we have this clean and presentable, in a sense. So the top exec was like, it'll take about 30 days, So Rusi Modi is like, can't it be done in one day? And the top exec was pretty puzzled, how. So he called for a carpenter. He just interchanged the boards between the worker's toilet and the executive toilet.
Okay.
And that's it. Within like 2 or 3 days, the worker's toilet was clean. And then he instructed that every 15 days the boards were to be replaced.
Okay.
Right. So that shows, that the ideas can come from anywhere. It's more about the intent. Do we want to do something about, and how do we want to do it? We can do it, the management way, which is like the roundabout and no guarantees of if and when it'll happen. Or we just do something that's actually effective for those customer groups. And he also built in a safety measure in terms of once it's interchanged every 15 days, there's no chance for either of them to become dirty for too long or stay there.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned about the Tata Steel, right now I can remember one example. I was watching one episode of Indra Noori ma'am, chairperson, CEO of PepsiCo, former. And she was looking for a solution where their packaging was moving ahead because everything was changing, and she felt like something should be done. Why consumers are not buying their product and why they are lacking behind, and so she went to some seminar. Currently, I don't remember the full situation, but there's some insights that I remember from that. So what she did was she came back from that. It was a design seminar or something, and at that time she was mentioned about the design thinking. So what she did was she told her team members that you go to all the design institutes, the seminars or events, and then come back why we are lacking. So after coming back, the team members, for them, they were like, okay, it's like just the design, why should we care? But after implementing all those strategies, events, taking the team members to events, working on the design thinking parts, the packaging got changed, and then what we are seeing today is that result. So like you mentioned about the Tata Steel, and right now when you were talking, I was thinking about Indra Noori ma'am. So yeah, she was also talking about design thinking earlier. For them,
she's a huge believer.
Yeah, she's a huge believer in design, how can design impact everyone's lives,
Right.
yeah. So coming to the next question, at what stage we can implement, and what kind of team do we need for corporations like this if you want to implement design thinking? Because I also remember that she was saying we need someone at Pepsi who can implement all the design creativity, design thinking, handle all the challenges that they are having so that they can move ahead. So what would you say on this?
Okay. I read this quote recently. I think it would apply. Where, there's this forward, I think on Facebook or something, where it's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now, right?
Okay.
So I think whenever you realize, whenever you decide is the best time to start implementing design thinking. So I've been rereading 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel.
Okay.
And in that he says something like every startup, I don't remember the exact words, but he's like each startup kind of begins in a very unique set of circumstances. And it only starts up once, so like each startup has like a unique defined starting point. So I believe the best time to start is maybe before you start up itself. So for example, again, unconsciously, I think I ended up doing this in 2012 when I was starting my consulting practice. That before I started, I went around meeting a lot of my ex-colleagues, ex-industry contacts, all of that from the VC space. Also, some of my professors. I was going to a bunch of startup meets, interacted with young founders and all of that. To try and get a sense of if I am to get into this consulting space, what do I offer as services? Because we know that all these services are available. I knew that there are some that I can offer which would be more relevant than others, which I can probably deliver better than others and all of that. But I also wanted to know from them as to what might be relevant services, and they did give me like a broad list of you can do this and that, all of that. And I condensed that, but it was still a huge list. It's about 6 to 8 services that I was offering. And funny thing is, none of them mentioned elevator pitch or business plan for fundraising and all of that. But then once I started, for some reason, companies and entrepreneurs would get in touch with me, given my VC background. So they're like, "Can you prepare, pitch for we're trying to raise funds or trying to grow?" And that's what. So it didn't strike me till then that this background might make for a relevant service. So for the next few years, that was like the bread and butter of my consulting practice, where I would be working with them in terms of creating either a growth plan or business plan or elevator pitch for fundraising. Last few years, I've discontinued that like a bunch of years back, but in the last few years, a lot of services have popped up where they do a business plan or an elevator pitch for as low as 20,000 or something. So of course, my fees used to be like many times of that. But there was a reason for that. In that I wasn't just creating a pitch for them or fitting it into a particular standard template or anything. I would spend about a month with each of these businesses, go through their entire business model in detail. In some cases, shred it up, help them rebuild it. So everything from refocusing of customer segments, as in better aligning them with what the business intended to do. Pricing, I've reworked bundling of services. So in the sense, features for different services. So you create different categories of, whom do you want to offer this package to and this package to. So I've reworked all of that for them. The projections, sometimes the organization structure also. So in the sense, so for them, I don't know, at least the benefit that they used to find, some of them used to also come back for other work later, is that they get a better understanding of their business in terms of, where the alignment is, the purpose and all of that. So I think that was the core addition rather than, just preparing a pitch or filling a particular template.
Yeah, because like you just mentioned that you were preparing the pitch. There might be other companies who will be doing work for even 5,000 or 20,000, because for them it's like just a sales pitch. But who are people in this want to scale, who are very serious about making a change in the industry and providing value to the people? They are very serious about this thing. It's not a sales pitch.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's true. But for me, it's more like I say this a bunch of times. See, when you create a company, it's kind of like creating an entity. It's almost like creating a baby. So in the sense, it's not just about a bunch of people hanging out together. In that case, you just probably hang around, catch up a coffee or beer or something. Here, the fact that people come together to create a company is for a much larger purpose. So for me, then that company fulfilling that purpose becomes like the core objective, whether or not sometimes even the founders may or may not realize. So sometimes what happens is they look at it more as a vehicle to, let's say, fulfill their lifestyle over the short to medium term or something.
Yeah.
So in those cases, of course, there is some misalignment, but otherwise, a lot of times, the promoter is, of course, has a long-term vision, but he or she may or may not remember it in their day-to-day routines. You're familiar with it, right?
Yeah.
Once you start a company, there's so many random things that pop up every day, and I've seen this happen a lot. So people then get sidetracked into just fighting these daily fires with the teams, with following up with clients, so payments and all these little things, and then they forget like the larger picture that they were out there to build. So sometimes these are just exercises where I try to help them in terms of defining or clearing the view on that, and then figuring out how they can get there. So in terms of implementation, like you asked, so the best time is early on. As a company grows, there are these little complexities that kind of get involved, and then over time, those complexities become huge. So like you've seen large companies, if you've got friends there, they complain about the long process, for the small changes.
Yeah.
So in fact, a couple of years back, one of the large banks in India was trying to implement a culture of design thinking or creativity across the board. So it was a huge project, and I was trying to kind of get in through the door. There was this person who had connected me to somebody there, and I was trying to like follow up with them. I'd sent a little presentation and all of that, but I think they had already finalized on one of the popular the top design firms in the world by then.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the execution, right? I don't know. I mean, I'm no one to question them, but it didn't seem to work in that. Later on, when I checked, that entire initiative had fizzled out. So somehow they had chosen an execution plan where people from that design firm came here, trained a selected top set of executives who were then expected to trickle down that learning through the organization, which I don't think would work out, because again, I mean, at least my limited approach would have been that each set of the hierarchy in a company, each one has its own set of incentives, its own set of drivers, its own set of concerns and fears and all of that, and you would have to tailor training specifically for each. So of course, a bulk of it would still remain the same. You can't change concepts for this, but again, coming to the people aspect of things, that you need to speak to each employee group in a particular way, in a manner that they understand at their level. So something just flowing from the top is not going to water the entire organization, so to speak, with education. So unfortunately, I don't think that particular project worked out.
Okay.
Because I was, a small setup back then, but I still would have loved to tackle something of that sort.
Yeah, sure. Because I think whatever you are starting, you should start with a very good pace. Right now, you were giving the example. If you want to start right now. Otherwise, it was back. If you want to plant a tree, the correct time was like 20 years back, and now it's the time. So I think all the founders and CEOs and organization people who are listening or watching to this episode of ours, I think they should start implement right now. It will bring a lot of value to it. And when we start talking about the startups, whenever we start a company, we should always look at the bigger picture. It's not about the numbers and the sales and just client coming in, you get the work and it's done. It's not like this. Because when I started, let's take a small, I will give you an example of mine only. I was posting like Game of Thrones on my social media official pages at the time, and one of my seniors saw that. He was teaching me digital marketing at that time, and he said that don't post anything like this only, because uh, it was a picture like this. Above there was the white walkers, and below it was the company's description. And I started laughing after hearing him that don't post anything like this. You will get the numbers and followers and everything, but now you are not alone, so you can't take any foolish decisions. It's a very small thing. I can just delete it, but I don't know who are the people.
Wonderful.
Yeah, who are the people who have seen it and they were thinking like what kind of work they will be doing. They are posting Game of Thrones just for the sake of getting likes and followers. So I don't consider this as a good practice for everyone. So like,
It's amazing
same.
advice. Yes.
Yeah. Because after that, I also checked Idea, Vodafone pages, and what they were doing. I started following big companies, and even if you go to the pages and see the work, what they have posted, even if then they haven't posted for 1 year, you will only see work, pure work, what they are doing and what they're offering. That's it. Game of Thrones, all the memes can be shared via friends on WhatsApp and other platforms, but don't do it on your social media pages.
All right.
Yeah. And similarly, coming back to your design thinking, I think if someone has heard about design thinking and what kind of value and problems it can solve, start implementing right now. This is the correct time. Even if someone is having a budget constraint or anything like this, you can talk to the advisory firm. You can talk to the firm who is handling, like
Absolutely.
you are the one. Just tell them this is the budget, because according to my experience, budget can be done in the phases. Everything can be done divided into phases, and then from the beginning, when you will start implementing it, and after 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, you will start noticing what kind of results I'm getting from it. So I think people and the founders should start implementing right now, as you said. And coming back to my, not coming back, so I'm talking about the value and other things. So I know what kind of value I'm providing to the companies and what they are getting. So if someone has implemented the design thinking, and what he can or she can expect after 1 or 2 years, what kind of value they will be bringing, design thinking will be bringing to it.
Okay. I think before this, did you mention team or something? I think you had mentioned. Sorry, I multiple questions. I tend to get a little lost. But
yeah, it's okay.
But I've just quickly to mention the team bit. So I have worked independently on projects. I've worked with teams. Both my external team. I have worked with client teams.
Okay.
Yeah. If everyone's on board with the objective of this, it can be implemented. Again, so I wrote the book so as to simplify it. So
Design
somebody
the future. Yeah.
and I've also made like a PDF of the 9-step process, kind of explaining it, that's available on my website for free. So
Okay.
so theoretically anyone can do it for free. And like I mentioned, it takes small efforts. You don't have to learn design thinking to do it. You have the intent, ideas come to everybody, it can be solved. Come to values, I think the long-term value of design thinking is actually tough to measure because it's huge, right? And I think it kind of trickles into aspects which uh, you can't really put like a formula to figuring out. So, for example, it's my belief that design thinking helps create more human leaders.
Okay.
It helps create more human companies, and as a result, hopefully, more human societies. So let's say a couple of stories, I think, I mentioned them on my blog from time to time. This is something that I found out like 2-3 years back. Back in the day, JRD Tata used to, I think, so he had this Mercedes car, and there's this area in Bombay where one of our family friends, they used to live. And this friend of mine, his son back then used to go to school, and on the way back, the bus used to drop them at the bottom of the slope, and then it's like this huge climb up. And he was a little, heavy kid.
Okay.
So he'd be like, huffing and puffing up that slope, and every once in a way, this Mercedes car would stop, and the gentleman sitting in the back would ask this boy to get in. So he would sit in front with the driver, and then the car would drop that kid to the house, like my friend's house, and then go. So this happened for quite some time. And then, like on random days, right, whenever that car would be passing, my friend's son was walking on. And so one day, I think at dinner time, this kid, for some reason, just mentioned that this old gentleman, I get a drop sometimes home, so I don't need to walk this thing. I get a drop in this Mercedes car and all that. And I think the grandmother described, the gentleman like, oh my God, you've been dropped by JRD Tata. So imagine that, that somebody who's heading such a huge group of companies is not just, driving around in his Mercedes, but be somebody we spots who, I don't know, just these little differences, right? So imagine how that changes this person's perception about what a leader should be. Right? So it's not just about the profit making. It's not just a very detached company that's doing stuff. It's about a leader who's there and, just would go out of his way or her way to just help somebody with these little gestures, right? It doesn't really cost them anything. So a couple of years back, this friend's son, he posted it on Facebook.
Okay.
And a bunch of people from that area also mentioned similar experiences. Which means probably, I don't know, every time he was either heading back home or wherever, probably just, somebody whom he sees who's struggling up a slope or something, he'd be like, let me just drop you till the end of to the top of the hill or whatever. Right? So little experiences of that. And then look how that kind of translates to, the bit I mentioned that it's tough to actually gauge the value or the far-flowing effects of this kind of a mentality or an attitude. Again, a couple of years back, I was at Indian Hotels, the Taj Group.
Okay.
So I was meeting one of the global leaders there to, pitch one of, our consulting offerings to them. And while I was waiting for him in the reception area, behind the lady at the reception, there were these pillars, a few pillars around her, and each one had like a name and a date on it. And then there was the last pillar which just had the name Lucy on it. Okay. So I kind of guessed what that would be, but then I still confirmed with the lady at the reception. I was like, are these in memory of your staff who got? So she's like, yes. So each name is for one of the staff who got killed in the Mumbai attacks, right?
Okay.
You've probably watched videos and heard about the bravery of the Taj staff, right? So each one of those pillars. And then I was like, what about the last one? It just has a name there, Lucy. So that was apparently a stray dog which used to live right outside the hotel.
Oh.
That they used to feed, and they had grown attached to, and who unfortunately also got killed in that shooting. So this is, imagine the Taj group of hotels, their headquarters, having a pillar in memory of a stray dog that got killed outside of their hotel. So there is no monetary value to such creating this kind of a culture or implementing this kind of a culture or something like that. So this has to flow from the founders. It has to flow from each hire that you make, each customer that you choose. Of course, the customer chooses you, but you also need to choose your customers in terms of, are these the right people to do business with or not? So in fact, I also told this gentleman that I met there, this global head, the story about J.R.D. Tata driving, and he was happy, but he wasn't surprised. Imagine that. I mean, anybody else? I mean, the first time I heard it, I was shocked. Like, wow, how did that happen? But he was not surprised, so to speak. He wasn't shocked. So it was almost like, yes, that's part of our culture. That's who we are. And to have thousands upon thousands of employees kind of believe in that culture, I think comes from humility, comes from empathy, comes from intent for the people that we serve.
Yeah. I think that's great.
So I think those are the values.
Yeah, it's like the example of Mr. J.R.D. Tata is taking me back to, there was a news where Mr. Ratan Tata visited his employees, former employee in Pune, during the COVID times, and I think these small things might be not the small things. At this kind of situation, it's like you need to know what kind of right words you're choosing, because it's hard to describe the feeling. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are the things which make great leaders, and tell people about it, that you should be generous to others. You should be helping to others. Yeah. And right now I'm having so many memories right now. What are the things? Yeah. So, okay. Now, I think I'm still in that memories right now. Yeah. So, coming back to the design, I think it's always like coming back to the design. We always go with the flow. And in my previous, season also, to whomsoever I have talked, and we skipped the topic, and then we were moving back to the memories. It's like more of a communication.
Right.
We all are connected through design, and I think this is the best thing that we can do. Talking to each other, being a part of the community, and then sharing all our experiences. So, talking about this experiences, like I'm pretty sure that you might be facing design challenges every day, or what is your day-to-day life like? What kind of design challenges you face?
Not so much face, but I think I've become more attuned to observing design. So design could be to do with either a product itself, a feature, maybe the placement of the product, or also to do with business models, how people perceive those models, all of that. I'll just mention a few actually. I mean, yes, one, I couldn't happen to, Zomato keeps coming to mind. So back in 2008, when I was working in the venture capital space, I was supremely keen on starting a food ordering service. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, back then, I think only one or maximum two companies existed in that space.
Okay.
Fairly small and limited in terms of region. But but I was like very keen, more from a personal need point of view, that I saw of it as a convenience, which seemed to make more sense. As you got busier with life, that you didn't have to either go and pick up food or go to a restaurant and all of that. And then whenever you wanted, you just order stuff. Of course, we didn't have the technology or the wherewithal, the ecosystem to kind of support it back then. So the first thing I did, of course, being in the VC space, was I opened up an Excel spreadsheet and I started creating, what the model might look like. And so I had like 2 or 3 different versions of this. One was where the restaurant would deliver home. The second one was where I would create the delivery as a service. So there were no mobile apps back then, so it would have had to be a website where people would be ordering. I even considered the option of having a call center, because transition would not be easy, right? I mean, back then people were not really used to picking up food options online and then paying for it or whatever. So in some cases, so I'd factored in like a few people in terms of support. So if people needed either to give the order on a call, so that was also one variant model which was factored in. Did the math, and it did not make sense in terms of the numbers were just not getting there. And this is without factoring any venture capital investments. Right?
Okay.
And I've even blogged about this at some point, maybe around 2011, 12, sometime after I started blogging. I wrote down, thoughts from all my notes from 2008. I'm not sure if I shared that spreadsheet as well. I'm not sure if it's still online, all of that. But I had mentioned concerns, and along the way, I also posted once or twice more. As I used an experienced Zomato and Tiny Owl and all of the others before that. That some of those concerns still remained for a long period of time. So these companies were still kind of burning huge amounts of VC money to try and figure out problems and solve them along the way. And I'm not sure they're still quite there in terms of having solved it, because they're still trying to experiment with so many different things. And just yesterday, I took a session with some of these postgrad design students where similarly, it's just 1 hour session. I said, today what we'll do is try and identify products where either a feature that most people are not aware exists, or what its application is, or something that's not designed properly, or things like that. So some things that come to my mind. One, couple of years back, switch panels that we used to get, right? So even though the switches were rectangular, narrow, the panel itself, the slots were square, which means it was tough to assign switches and plugs. The plugs used to be square, switches were narrow. So I actually have that problem with the one set in my kitchen where the right one is for the microwave, left one is for the fridge, and both switches are in the center. Right? And the approach to that, because you're passing the fridge, is at a slight angle. So there's a tendency sometimes, if you're in a hurry and you switch on the microwave or switch off, you can accidentally switch off the fridge or something like that. So tiny things like that, you start noticing a little more. So many other things. So recently I read this article about, so this was probably them. The article was a little old, probably from 2019 or 20. US FAA had approved a design firm's middle seat design for airlines. So what that company had done is So the middle seat is usually the most uncomfortable, right, on airplanes, and usually they are the ones that you get allotted. What they did was they widened it by 3 inches, and the placement was slightly back and lower than the other 2 seats, right? And they felt that it would improve the middle seat passenger experience, and for some reason, FAA approved. I went through. I just happened to chance upon this, and I was like, something's wrong about this or off about this. So I went through their website. I went through videos about it, descriptions about it, and all of that. And then I've actually written a blog post on it, listing out the concerns in terms of. So one is the average human being. The back is not straight like a ruler, right? It bends, it curves on the edges. Your shoulders can be round up here. So in the existing design, even though the seats are narrow, let's say in forward and upright position for takeoff and landing, all of them on the same line.
Yeah.
So now what happens with the new design, if you push the middle seat a few inches back, and let's take, so usually if you talk about, let's say, an obese passenger, right? Also, the average height is usually going to be above, let's say, 5'3", 5'4". And we don't find fat people who are very short or whatever. So usually the passengers who may be a little more well-built are also likely to be of average height or more, right? So now if that person earlier, had a flat plane across the 3 rows to sit, now suddenly you push them slightly backward, which means that they fold inward because they have the other 2 seats pushing them in, at least during takeoff and landing. Also, since they've lowered the seat, any average height person is then going to probably have, apart from the lower back pain, will also probably face thigh or calf pain, because the seat lowers and you don't get thigh support up to your knee joint for long periods of time. That strains your muscles, so your legs experience strain.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote this. I mean, I don't know what their response would be to this, but let's hope they find it useful.
Yeah.
So again, so many other examples come to mind. Number one, like TV remotes, if you know, it's not something we pay too much attention to, but then I'm sure there are remotes that we subconsciously kind of prefer to other remotes because how the layout is, the buttons kind of come naturally, so we don't have to keep looking at the buttons to press. We can operate them without looking.
Yeah.
So it's not like we will explicitly mention this or recommend it to somebody, but then maybe our choices in terms of which DTH provider to take might also be influenced partly by the experience we have, which also includes our experience in operating the remotes. Right? Soap dispensers, just tiny example. Again, I probably have one blog on this, blog post on this. In those liquid soap dispensers, right? So there was this one restaurant or bar that I'd been to where just the button and then the body of the dispenser. For some reason, you would assume that this is just a press button and the soap dispenses from the body.
Yeah.
But what I realized is it dispenses from that button itself, from the tip. Like you press here and then just below that, it's dispensing soap from there.
Okay.
So yeah, you tend to observe these things. So that one soap dispenser was placed between 2 wash basins. So from either side, if you reach out, good chance soap is going to fall either next to your hand or. And so maybe just a small design change there where the button becomes an inverted triangle to kind of point out that the soap's going to come out from there would probably help in not creating a mess. You could probably have people slipping and falling down there because the soap collecting on the floor or whatever.
Like now, like you are giving examples, I've also noticed some. Like me and my friend, whenever we go to some restaurant, any cafe, we don't look at menus at all because He's also a designer, and he's working for the packaging of medicines. So you can imagine, like, his eyes, like his eye are- he are
Oh
he's
yeah,
having like eagle eyes. Okay, because
absolutely.
this is the size of like a strip, and he has to work
Exactly.
on this, all the typography, all the logo design of the company. For
Fantastic.
he has to fit everything in this particular size only.
Hmm.
This is the condition. And I'm also from the design field. So whenever we used to go to restaurants and cafe, we used to look at the menus, and we were pointing at, this is the double space, this is the triple space, and this is not aligned properly. Then we used to blame the designer and the restaurant owner, because he has not looked so carefully. And he's a layman that we can understand from the
Right, right, right.
owner's point of view. But being a designer, how can someone type like double spaces or triple spaces? And after some time we noticed that each and every menu, not talking about the big people, they really do a great job in designing things. They do take care of minor details. But going to the regular restaurants, and it was like a bizarre. And looking at the menus, we were like, okay, let's just order a regular thing and we'll leave. And also, like, we never notice, like, why is the toothpaste cap? We have to always, roll it and then press it, and then only your toothpaste will be coming out. So, all thanks to the product designers who are working in these big industries. There are so many examples that we even didn't
Oh
notice.
yeah.
And it's because designers are working so hard to get things done right. So, like you just mentioned about the soap, I like the soap dispenser. I was having one example of, I went to a restaurant. Uh, okay, restaurants are example coming more, but okay. So they were having this similar kind of Dettol bottle. It was not Dettol,
Hmm.
and when I pressed, it was not coming down on my hand. It was like going in some other direction, and I was like, what is this product design? Who is the designer? How much in money they have invested in the products? And right now, it's not his. It's a job is to pour the soap in my hand, and it's like spreading all over the place. So there are few things which has been done right, and there are few products which
Absolutely.
I would say not a good option. Also, like I was going to, there's one problem with me after coming to the design field. I'm becoming very choosy and observant. So I was going, went to shopping for buy, uh, uh, taps and other things, all the equipments for my bathroom. And I was like looking at this beautifully designed tap. It was like, yeah, it was just, I fall in love with that tap and I wanted it. So yeah, these are the examples of great design. I was observing it very, very, like how it is made, what are the groovy lines it is having, who is the designer. It was from the Asian Paints, and
Okay.
whomsoever the designer will be, I think he has done a very great job on this. Yeah, I
But I think
think.
it's a journey, right? Like we never really reach, so we need to keep improving on
Hmm.
both, the observing of existing designs, also the kind of designs that we create,
Hmm.
and with an increased view, I think we need to become also a little more responsible about the solutions that we offer. In the sense, we've seen how some damage has been done, or so much damage has been done by solutions of the past. For example, plastic, once it came into consumer use, let's say the 1950s or thereabouts. So back then they would have thought, okay, this is a great uh, option to have as a material, plastic for consumer goods. But then that's blown so much out of size that now we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we contain this mess that we have created because of plastic? So I think, again, as designers, design thinkers, it's also a responsibility to kind of make sure that the solutions we create don't then start creating bigger problems than the problems that they
Yeah,
solve
I think
today.
it's purely the designer's responsibility. Even if you are a fresher, you are a mid-level person or very experienced, whatever you are doing, observe things and always think like a consumer also. Once you have finished the product, designing everything, whether you are from the product design industry, you are from the UI UX branding or any kind of industry, think about the consumer perspective also, whether he or she or they will be liking this product or not. This is very important after you have completed all your work. And yeah, I think our session is like become really productive, and we can go on and on, but we have to put an end to it. And this is the reason I've started with you, because you are a gem from the design industry, and all your experiences like working at the venture capitalist at Sidby, and then working in the airline industry and other industries. So I think people might be dreaming that why I'm not Mr. Shrutin. So I think thanks a lot for joining us. I think this is the best way to start my second season of Mountford Studio podcast. I can't think of anything else right now, because it's a very good start for me. Starting with and interacting with you.
I think it's design and the fun journey that it offers. That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay. And bye. Take care.
Thank you for joining me. Subscribe and learn more at mountwoods.com.